Back live in the studios here with Viewpoint with our co-host, Mrs. Busby, whom we're glad to have back, and our guest from the Salvation Army, Rebecca Nydeggen. I didn't pronounce that right.
Nydeggen.
Nydeggen. Okay. Try that one more time, Bill, easily. Salvation Army. I'm noting here, really, as we all know, how far-reaching it is and the effect. Under rebuilding lives, you have a little category, a big category, missing person, disaster relief. Let's get back to specifics here in Lincoln and homeless folks. And your facilities at the Key Center are ladies and children.
The residential services are for women and children, but our services in every other category are for all residents. Yes, correct?
Right. You know,
excuse me, honey.
I think we're very naive, sheltered, any kind of adjective that we can think of. Because the other day in the paper there was a listing of evictions. I'm so sorry, had no idea that locally it was... I had no idea of the scope of the problem. Mm-hmm. You do, I'm sure, Rebecca.
We do. And the stereotypical picture of eviction might equate to someone assuming that there's delinquency involved. What we are seeing over the last 18 months is that there are forced evictions through utility shutoff that end up becoming evictions because the house is uninhabitable. Or there are evictions that take place through the loss of wages in a family that had one or two wage earners and has a loss of a job and then loss of benefits following that loss of a job. Sometimes there's a loss of housing through loss of wages because of a medical or an injury situation. And so a lot of these things happen behind the scenes. Obviously, our casework is confidential, and we don't release information on specific families or households. But what we are seeing is an increase in the request for assistance. Our caseload has quadrupled since January.
Since January?
Since January. And most of that relates to the fact, to the labor situation throughout the region, to families that were previously employed, facing unemployment and long-term unemployment. And so families that would never have considered applying for assistance 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago are applying for assistance. And in relation to something that you said earlier about the military, many of our veterans returning are having a difficult time finding jobs, not just because of medical disability or injuries that they may have incurred in the combat zones, but also because their jobs have gone to someone else in their time of service. And so we do work with veteran families, many of them young, 35 and under, in terms of married couples or single head of household families who have served our country and are still finding a hard time obtaining employment on their return.
Rebecca, do you have many people or any people today who knock on the door asking for money, to be specific? Is there any of that going on?
There's always going to be that going on. People that maybe aren't taking responsibility for their own income or their own situation looking for a handout. But what I would say is the vast majority of our clients would never fall into that category. The Salvation Army is a last resort for them. They've attempted in every other way and shape and form to meet the needs of their household, and they're coming to us as a last resort.
In my early days in business, I was down on Chicago Street, and between Kirpin's grocery store in one corner and Alvy's drugstore in the other corner, I think we had about 6 taverns besides my business. And it was not uncommon. It was very common for me to get hit up out there by some guy asking for, I said, "Are you hungry, partner?" "Yeah, I sure am." I said, "Well, let's go down to Malloy's and I'll feed you." "Well, I said, "Well, you're not hungry, you're thirsty." And they wanted somebody to go next door to Buck Luby's and have a drink. And I'd never turn them down if they wanted something to eat. But 90 times out of 10, that isn't what they were after. They wanted a little booze money. So right. You have to be a little discriminatory. And that's what you have to work with, too.
Right, and we do extensive screening. We actually verify and document hardship. No one can just walk in the front door, spin a story, and obtain cash. That's not how we operate. We work with landlords, we work with utility companies, we work with other agencies, we work with, for seniors, for instance, we work with pharmacies to help replace life-sustaining prescriptions in the case of severe hardship. But we work with third parties. We're not in the business of handing out money, but we do give very, very much needed assistance.
Like a voucher for groceries, for instance, rather than...
Actually, we have a
cash?
food pantry.
Yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit about that, too. And how do you stock it? Because I know that our church, for instance, and I'm sure lots of others, have an in-gathering year-round for the, quote, the food pantry. But now where do you get your groceries?
Well, we have a number of different venues. Sometimes people will donate groceries to us directly for the food pantry. Others donate finances for our food pantry. And then a very small percentage of our annual budget comes from an emergency food and shelter program, which is a federal program that is earmarked for specific localities based on unemployment figures. But that is less than 5% of our annual budget would come from any federal program. We work together with local grocers, we work with churches, we work with individuals, and we do a great deal of food provision on an emergency basis. Whereas people are familiar with one of the other larger food pantries in Logan County that has open hours 4 hours a week, we're on call for emergency food 7 days a week. And so if we have a disaster or someone has a loss of all of their food in their house, we can provide that to them as part of our disaster service. But if somebody loses their job or loses a wage earner and they're not able to get to another food pantry, we can provide that emergency food.
If anybody is disposed to offer any assistance or any help, how would they get in touch with you? Maybe they found that they have things that they don't need anymore that you might be of use to you. Are you in a position to take cast-off items such as that?
Well, we have
of course, what they might be.
In answer to that question, this is a very common question for me. I get a lot of calls at my office. We have a store operated by the Adult Rehabilitation Center staff, which is in Springfield. And in Logan County, our store is on Woodlawn, and the income and the proceeds from that store actually support the Adult Rehabilitation Center in Springfield, which draws from the entire region for adults that need to get into rehabilitation for substance abuse. We also do as needed requests for in-kind or household items following disasters. And there are times, and this happens to be one of those times, that we need specific household items to meet the needs of families displaced by disasters. And we'll work directly with people. They are welcome to call our office if we've published a press release following a disaster like a fire or a tornado, and work directly with us. But on a year-round basis, our store on Woodlawn actually takes household items into the store itself for sale, and the proceeds of that go to the rehabilitation center.
Let's have that number one more time now that they could call. And I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, if you call that number, which we're going to repeat here in just a second, that you will not press 1 for English and press 2 for Spanish.
Right.
Go right ahead, Rebecca, with that number, and then we'll wrap it up.
732-7890. And to reach me, they can press 11, which is in English.
We appreciate very much your presence here this morning, and we thank you for your work on behalf of the Salvation Army in our community. We always like to sum up Viewpoint with some little saying or quote or slogan. How do you say that? Quote or slogan?
It's not easy.
Old John D. Rockefeller, who passed out dimes to all the kids on the streets, said, I always tried to turn every disaster, a little bit appropriate here, into an opportunity. Thank you for Viewpoint.